Okay, team. We are ready to roll into it. Hopefully, everyone can hear me fine. Thanks for those who are coming back again. We've run a few of these webinars this winter. It's been quite cool. We've got another one coming up next month on releasing. So yeah, if for anyone who hasn't been here before, down the bottom you'll see the opportunity you can ask questions. So there's a button there to do that. I think there's a button that's ask questions, and it's in the background pushing the buttons and rolling the slides through. So you can just put your questions and stuff into the chat there, and we'll answer them at the end, or we'll do it along the way if we can. So if I'm not making sense on anything, just hey, Adam, mate, that doesn't make sense. Give me a hard time. That's all good. But yeah, we had a bit of fun putting this together. We've collated a few photos that the team have collected over the years. And yeah, so here we are. Common planting mistakes and how to avoid them. We're going to cover a few things off tonight. Classic situations like these flax that are there shorting out wires and wrecking fences that we see on our daily travels around the countryside. So yeah, let's rip into it. Cool. So basically running through five simple categories. Don't want to keep everyone too long. We're sort of aiming for 30 or 40 minutes tonight, half an hour and a bit of time to ask questions along the way. So we're going to go through site preparation. So this is a big one where people go, oh, shit, it's getting late, especially at the moment. It's getting late in the season. Let's just chuck some trees in. Yeah, and then what can go wrong there? Wrong tree, wrong place. So yeah, just getting that bit of education around spreading the trees correctly. I think we covered that quite a bit now, actually, in our last webinar too. Planting technique, which actually came up in our last webinar, but just sort of making sure you follow a few key things. Big one we get is people teasing roots. In most cases, you want to avoid doing that altogether. And ruining trees. Trees too close together or too far apart. That's a really common one. And getting that right. There's no single right answer on that, but we'll talk through that. And then the other one is spring release. So looking after your plants once they're in the ground. So we'll work through those five tonight. There could well be a version two of this. We'll just spitballing a few ideas at the nursery this evening, and there's a few other things that we could potentially have included, and a few things that might come up tonight too. So yeah, we'll cover that off. So yeah, which is all good. Question there just about whether you can catch other webinars you missed. Yes, you can. Just send me an email if you like. We'll sort them out. They're on YouTube actually. I'll send you the links. That's easy. Anyway, so who am I? Bald guy with a beard and pink shorts, although they're orange shorts tonight. Not sure if you can see those. But yeah, I just love native trees. I'm a farmer. We've got 100 hectares here in Cambridge. Nurseries on the farm. Just I've always loved the bush, getting outdoors, but I really enjoy in our business getting to run that line between farming and biodiversity and doing the right thing for the environment. So we've got this, we work with these just amazing landowners who are out there doing magical things, and we get to be a small part of it. Yeah, just absolutely love trees. So that's me. Yeah, long term, like I say, it's that balance between productive farming, generating export returns, providing jobs for people, but also breaking down barriers to get trees in the ground. So, we always try and be relatively at the lower cost end of plant supply of our full service for supply and planting. We're not here to buy Adam a Ferrari. We're ultimately here to try and make some positive difference in the world. So, yeah, which other exciting things, like we're setting up a pest control project to bring kiwi back to our neighbourhood. So it's part of sort of the restore vision as well. So, but really it's just about helping out farmers get that balance between biodiversity and productive farming. So yeah, that's Restore Native. So yeah, based at Cambridge, grow about 1 million trees. It'll be about $1.2 million this year. Kind of a tree for everyone. We have trees from $2, smaller ones, through to, we do some bigger landscape type stuff as well. But primarily we're growing in this sort of half litre to a litre trees that are out there doing revegetation planting. So we deliver trees all across the North Island. This year we ship trees to Kapiti, we ship trees to Martinborough. When we do a heap of planting and maintenance and everything across the Waikato and Bay of Plenty. So yeah, we do on site. My job is to get out there and help to plan projects. We drone map areas to give people accurate data on what they're actually going to plant. give advice on where to put the trees. We can take care of spraying, planting, and ongoing maintenance as well. And as you can see, we're a bit of a ragtag bunch, guys and girls, tall and short, fat and thin, but we love it. We're just a bunch of really cool people to work with. So, slide number one, not accurately preparing your site. And I love the photo we've used there. So much to go back to that, and then I'll talk to it a little bit. This is actually, it's the worst part of a site that we planted about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was a classic situation where I arrived in the spring and went, great, a couple of sprays this summer, we can get on top of what's there. There was a little bit of convolvulus, a little bit of gorse, and a little bit of privet, and we'll nail it with sort of maintenance from there. We arrived back in May to come and do the planting, and they're like, yeah, we didn't get around to that spraying, but we've only got funding for this year, Adam. You need to plant it. And I was like, okay, we can plant it, but we're going to get straight in with a good weed maintenance plan. Oh, yeah, we'll sort that out. And then 2 years later, we've basically got a big bloody mess like this. So the rest of the site isn't too bad, but there's an area there that basically we're going to be getting back in, spraying up the whole lot and replanting. So yeah, we'll talk through some of that in a bit more detail in the next slide. So one of the biggest things we see, and as I mentioned earlier, this time of the year, sometimes people rush in and they go, God, we'll just get trees in the ground. It's all good. But the reality is when you take the grazing pressure out of areas, or if you've got a bit of weed establishment in there, it gets so much worse once it's locked up. And the point that I make there is that your control options go out the door. You can't just spray brush killer all over an area that's got native trees in it because it's going to kill the trees. So removing things like blackberry and convolvulus and honeysuckle and that are things best done beforehand. So how to do that? Privet, blackberry. Yep, that's right. Yeah, how to do that. Yeah, you're on to it. And we'll skip to the next one. So yeah, key tips there. Identifying problems weeds early and taking action before planting. So look, summer is the time to spray those weeds. They're most active. Things like convolvulus and all the climbing things, blackberry, whatnot, they're really active in summer. Nail them then. It's about the timing of that warm weather, and basically nailing those trees plants where they're growing. There's also often a long residual on those brush kill herbicides, which will actually kill the trees if you plant them directly in afterwards. So we really want to be out there targeting that weed spraying, in the summer beforehand. But look, sometimes it might take 2 or 3 summers to get on top of the weeds. Like, you're building a forest that's going to be there forever. Rushing and throwing trees in is just not the way to sort of to get in and get stuck into it. So I see a question there. Well, I might just grab that while we're here. PowerPoint after. Have you pressed using only a brush cutter and no chemical before? Yes. So yeah, really good point. Thank you, John, for asking that. Yes, we have. It's a short-term fix. You can cut things back, but if you're not actually killing that plant, you're just giving it a headache often. Or then if you do completely knock it out and you're knocked back to bare ground, you can often get weeds sort of rushing away again. Look, manual control of weeds and manual control of releasing as well is something that can be done. It's just not as efficient as spraying. So if you've got the time and you've got a relatively small area, no issue with manual control of weeds. But ultimately, yeah, and sort of a bang for buck in terms of money and time, spraying's the way to go. So yeah, you don't ignore things like blackberry. Don't ignore things like convolvulus. Deal with them in the summer. If you have to wait a year to plant, we highly recommend doing that. I don't want. We spend a lot of time growing our trees, and we don't want to send them out there to die. Yeah. So that's our recommendation here. Next one. Not spot spraying. Now, this is an interesting one because a lot of people go, "Oh, we don't spot spray anyway." This is a really interesting site because the little highlighted circles are trees hiding in the grass. And so the spot spray is just about giving that tree a good start. We don't bring our babies home from the hospital and just send them off into the forest and tell them to get a job. And your trees are the same. We need to just sort of look after them and give them a few cuddles along the way. The big thing about that is the trees get overrun pretty quickly, and spot spraying just gives them an area where they can have a nice little home. So the big thing is that spring growth, and we're coming into that period now. Grass will start taking off in September. If you haven't pre-sprayed, they can get away on you pretty quickly and start to smother trees. So it's much harder to release a tree than it is to actually spot spray beforehand. So it's actually easy just to get in there and give it a spot spray. A picture there where we've planted a little tree just into a spot. It's nice and dead. It's reducing the competition. And the point that I was making about release spraying, that's dead as everything else starts to grow around it. And it means that you can actually time your release spray. You know, you're busy on farm at this time of the year, and it can get away on you pretty quickly. So important to get it dead, give it a chance. So, but the other benefit, accurate spacing of trees. So there are lots of different ways of planting. Some people lay plants out and then go and plant them. But you find if you actually, walk 2 steps, spot, 2 steps, spot, you can get really good, accurate, wide ranging sort of plants like that, which is good. So, and get it done well. So effective spot spraying. Here's an idea. A bit of a sight we snapped one of the guys when they're out there. Pink spots all over the hillside, which is just our our dye from our spray. We recommend sort of 500 or 600 mil. You don't want to go out and be too big with your spots and have these big sort of meter wide, spots that almost wind up touching and a whole lot of dead grass. And look, yeah, can work, but you're also attracting more weeds and more work into that as well. We spot spray with glyphosate. Don't recommend putting brush killer into those pre-sprays unless you've got plenty of time. As we say, brush killing is a job for the summer. But what we do recommend is using Turb as a pre-emergent. So products out there like Tag that have got glyphosate and Turb in them. And what that is it's glyphosate to kill the grass that's there, and it's Turb to stop everything rushing back through it. So it just gives you a longer period into the spring before release spraying. And like we say, much easier to walk through a paddock and just spot than it is to actually release a tree. And from a labour and cost point of view, it's virtually half the time. So better to get that pre-spray in rather than be having to rush in there with a release in the spring, and it's sort of lower cost in the long run. Bit of a question here. What is this one? Does spot grubbing the ground, removing top layer of vegetative work as well as spot spraying if you have the time and don't want to use chemicals? Absolutely. Any manual control, if you've got the time and you're going to keep back onto it, it's just about removing that competition. You've got a spot around your tree. If you can clear that out, one thing I do like about spraying is you can actually lay the vegetation down and create a little bit of a mulch on top. But again, if you've got the time, you might be able to shovel a bit of mulch onto your trees as you go. So all these methods work, and we probably talk about it from a commercial point of view. Lowest cost labor, lowest cost of establishment. So yeah, we strongly recommend spot spraying. Wrong tree, wrong place. I'd love to actually. I wish we were in a room where I could go. How many people have seen flax planted too close to a fence line? Prime example. The other one we get is flax planted too close to flowing water, and then you get a flood and it gets washed out and gets washed down the creek and smashes into culverts. And flaxes are amazing, but yeah, not on fence lines and not immediately on the water. They exist somewhere in that sort of wet space in the middle. So it's good. And Marie, we'll come back to your question later. Sorry, I didn't quite catch it, but Annette will grab that. So spreading your plants across the site in a way that they'd naturally grow. So seems really simple, but I drive around the Waikato and there's actually another planting company out there who does it. They put swamp flaxes onto hillsides, and it's like not a natural place for that plant. It's not going to thrive there, and it actually wants to be in wetter areas. So it's sort of that one size fit all cookie cutter doesn't actually work. You want to create a natural environment where you've got your wetter species down near the streams, and then you've got your drier species further up the hills. And you may not have all of that profile in your planting area, so you pick plants accordingly. So we don't want to lose plants and we don't want to damage infrastructure. And want to have the right tree in the right place. Frost is another thing, which is a really good example that you don't want to plant frost tender trees out in the open and get them absolutely smashed. So what would you plant next to a fence line is a question that came through there. We start our planting 1.2 to 1.5 meters inside that fence line. So the number one thing is just to keep things away. And it's woody trees, things that the cows don't mind eating. You put a pit of spore on that's 1.5 meters in. As it grows, they'll chew it. They are relatively open in the bottom, so they're never actually going to be pushing against your fence wires and causing a problem. So yeah, that's my recommendation. Yeah, so cool. So assess the site before you order your plants. That is the best thing to do. So you don't just go, cool, we'll get a random mix. I like Manuka, I'll just get Manuka. Or I like flaxes, I'll just get them. Have a look at your site. And this is something we do a lot of. People send me a photo and go, hey, Adam, what do you recommend? Very easy for me to go, great. You want some of these here, some of those there, some of those there. And then as you get into your planting, if for people who are doing it already, they'll go, oh, yeah, I know what works well in these areas on my property. But getting that specific sort of layout, which is good. So there is a QR code there. You can scan to download. So yeah, we've got a little plant guide. Basically it's a simple map like that that's got the species that we supply listed along and the zones in which you plant them. So yeah, learning a few tips about that just helps to get your overall long-term look of it right, and survivability and thriving plants, which is key. So incorrect planting technique. This is a classic. Trees flopped all over on their side on the ground. Yeah, yeah, it's hard. We spend a lot of time growing trees and we really love them. And we want people to look after them when they go out. That's part of why we offer a planting service is, it's a simple task, but to repeat it all day long and ensure that it's done properly you can lose a lot of money by not doing it correctly. So too deep. So you want to aim for you've got the top of the potting mix on the plant and you want that to be roughly in line with the top of the soil or just touch below. But if you bury it too deep, you're going to wind up rotting around the stem of a lot of plants, which can cause a problem. Plant it too shallow and the plant's too top heavy, not enough in the ground, it's going to flop over, get covered by grass, drop dead. And the other thing we see is that if you don't press those trees in firmly, a lot of people are real soft touch, just a little bit of soil around. They're pretty hardy. Just push that soil in firm, get them solid on the ground, give them a tug so they're not coming out. And that means there's no air pockets around that plant, and they're not going to pull out. So, yeah, they'll be a way to go. Less transplant shock and off to a good start. So yeah, we'll have a look at those planting tips. So this is basically a screenshot from our last month's webinar. That's what we're talking about there. Root collar at the right level, firm soil around roots, space plants out, make sure that's done correctly. Getting good density is important, and we'll cover that a little bit more later. And making sure, especially when you're planting at this time of the year, that the root ball in those plants is actually wet. If we get 5 days of fine weather and we're getting into sort of 18 to 20 degree heat, those plants can actually dry out when they've been planted. So yeah, they're not in a heap of soil when they're sitting in their pot. So just make sure they're well watered before they go in. Question there. Can I answer that one? Sorry, bear with me. What we do in a site is recovered on engineered soil. Really good question. Ultimately, testing the fertility in that soil is key because you can add fertility to that soil really easily. So various different slow release fertilizer prills and using a quality one. Those pressed grey things you get are pretty hit and miss. We use an Osmocote one, but they've got a whole lot of range of different elements that you can have in those. So if you test the soil, you know what you need to put back in. This is where mulch and stuff around trees and that also helps. Often if you've got clay that's going to dry up really quickly or it's really hard, good getting that hole dug well, getting the fertility into it. Yeah, that's the way to go. And every site's a bit different, but yeah, I think that's important. So common one, too close together or too far apart. And the picture there is a classic example of too far apart. Spot the flaxes. I think we can probably count about 10 or 15 in an area that probably needed 150 plants, not 15 plants. And it might be a little bit hard to see on the screen, but there's a bunch of blackberry there now growing between those plants. weedy. It's just not enough plants. Really good intentions, but basically someone went, great, flax, I'm going to put these along my waterway. Can't see it in this photo, but a little bit further down, there's some that have been washed out. They're too close to the water. But ultimately, you just look at those weeds coming up through that area. So that's an example of too far apart. And as we look on the next slide, the top picture there, those trees look like they might be 600 or 800 mils apart, which is great if you've got the money. Don't get me wrong, plant as many trees as you like. How they've done it there is actually not terrible because they've got a heap of diversity in there. So trees are going to grow at different rates. Some are going to grow tall, some are going to spread out, and they're actually going to really quickly establish a forest. They're probably wasting quite a bit of money on plants in terms of achieving an overall result. But if they've got the money and they want to grow it fast, then chucking heaps of trees in is fine. I couldn't snap a photo of it, but a prime example we've had is where people have planted just Manuka, and they've planted them at sort of 700 or 800 mil apart. The Manuka is closed in, and you know how Manuka gets that black sooty sort of ick stuff growing on it? It's all shaded out. There's no way that anything's going to come up through that canopy because there's just no light whatsoever. Every tree's the same size, so you're not getting that diversity of light coming in. And that's just a classic case of planting too close together. Why did they do it in that case? It was not their money. It was government funding, and they had so many trees, and they just went, oh well, we'll just pack them in. But ultimately, it doesn't really work. You can establish trees densely like that, but you need to have some things that are going to grow up and go through that canopy. They're going to shade out. They're going to eventually wind up killing some of those trees below them because they won't have light, but you will be able to establish fast and close it in well. So everyone's got a different need. And I think that's the big thing. So we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, I think. So yeah, spacing shrubs out, we are generally planting between 1.5 and 2 meters. So at 1.5 meters apart for your plants, you're going to get plants touching in about 3 years' time. So it's a good time in terms of establishing canopy. So if you close that canopy, trees are touching each other, you're creating shade underneath. That's actually, if it's dappled light in there, you're going to stop grass from growing. You're going to get some bare soil that then other seeds can start germinating in, and you can start getting a succession forest like that. If they're too close together and you shade out and you get no light at all, you don't tend to get that. If they're too far apart, you get lots of weeds. And at the end of the day, the trees actually don't survive that well. So that's why we recommend like that. And like I said before, long-lived species, really important. So most people don't know, but something like a Manuka, its lifespan might only be 15 or 20 years. It's a really great plant, and then it's awesome for establishing. It's hardy. It can go in wet areas and dry areas. But if you're just planting Manuka, in 15 or 20 years, you're just going to have a dying forest. But if you put in long-lived species like Totara or Kahikatea, and those things that are going to live for a long time, grow big, they're going to establish in the shade and shelter of the Manuka, but eventually they're going to grow taller than them, shade them out, and start creating that sort of diverse forest. So really important to have them in the mix, whether that's initially when you're planting or coming in after a few years once there's a bit of shade. But yeah, it's a really important thing to do to establish that. And the final thing there is, like native trees like to hang out with their mates. So, exotic trees, if you're planting oaks, great, put them 10 meters apart, they'll stand alone, give them a stake, they're happy. A pine tree, they don't care. But native trees, they really need to have their friends around to provide a bit of shade and shelter, and they look after each other, and they grow together as a forest. So the point that I make there is we see the odd big old standalone tree. It didn't start like that. There would have been a forest around it. Progressively, these other trees have died away. If you just went and planted a rimu seed in the middle of a paddock, there's no way you're going to grow a big rimu. We need to have trees supporting trees. So. There's just a question that came through there that I might be able to answer. Ideal number of plants per hectare. It ultimately depends on how fast you want to establish, the species that are right for the area, and how much money you're willing to spend. If money was no object, we'd plant trees somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 meter spacings, achieve a really good result within sort of 2 to 3 years. with a really good releasing program. Might plant larger grade trees. You might spend $30,000 a hectare to get that result. In 10 years' time, you won't see a lot of difference between spending $30,000 a hectare and maybe spending $15,000 a hectare if you space them a little bit wider and slightly smaller trees or whatever. So it really does depend on the budget and the needs. So everyone's a little bit different. Uh, failing failing to spring release plants. Yes. So this is the fifth and final and honestly the biggest mistake that people make is failing to release their plants. You plant a tree and then everything rushes away in the springtime. That tree gets covered, it's shaded out and it dies. So yeah, we'll talk through some of the common things relating to that. So yeah, weeds and grasses stealing light, water, and nutrients. So that's the key thing, in that little safe zone that we've created by putting a pre-spray in. That tree then is full access to everything there. It's not having to share those nutrients and water and everything with the plants around it. So that's why it's important. And if you spray release that when the grass starts to come back through, you're giving it another few months of sort of good time, which is great. Ultimately, you're going to lose more plants when they get covered. There's a really cool photo there, and I'm not sure if it comes up that well, depending on what you're watching this on, but there's actually a pittosporum in there under that grass that's totally not visible from looking at it. And I remember I looked at the photo, James took it, and I was like, I can't see anything. And I was like, oh, hold on a second. The tree's actually in there. It just got classic spring growth rushed away. Farmer called us and went, oh, the trees have disappeared. So this is why we like to pre-spray, and we also take our releasing really seriously in terms of scheduling regular visits, making sure that where they're releasing them at the right time. So, which is one of those things that you can do to make sure that you do the right thing with releasing. So our process, and we'll cover this a bit next month. If you've got grass growing up a tree, and it's a good one example here, this one where we're spraying, that tree there is sort of a little bit over knee height, so it might be sort of 800 mils to a metre tall. You'll get grass, obviously, in the summer come up near to that height. So if it's smothering right around the tree, we recommend just sort of kicking some of that grass down and away off the tree. Then we spray around a circle around that tree to basically kill that grass that we've pushed off, and just take out that sort of, immediately around the tree. Some people use a cone over their sprayer. Some people use a shield. We sort of have an attitude that if you get 80% of the vegetation away from that tree, it's not having to compete with that. You just want to stop it getting smothered over, and that's the most important thing. So yeah, we're coming into that time. Next month, we're going to spend a lot more time talking about release spraying. And it's the number one thing that we get, like I say, a call from a farmer that goes, oh shit, Adam, I can't see my trees anymore. I was like, oh crap, like we could have really helped you 2 or 3 weeks ago. But once they're covered over, they're starting to weaken and get killed as it is. So yeah, that's all part of that. So is that us for that? It is. So next month, we'll be talking all about releasing. So bit of a quick one tonight. We sort of ran through that in sort of 25 minutes, but these are our most common stuff ups that we're dealing with, and they're not stuff ups because people are ignorant and deliberate about sort of making mistakes on things. It's just when you don't know, and we all got a bit of a Kiwi give it a nudge attitude, we can make mistakes, or we can let some of our beliefs get in the way of it. If you go, cool, I don't want to do pre-spray, great, but you still need to protect that tree. So let's make a plan on how we protect that tree. That might be laying down a wool mat around the tree or whatever it might be to actually help that. And we ultimately do all of these things. So yeah, next webinar will be basically in a month's time, on a Thursday for that one. And we're going to go through the whole process of releasing. So identifying a tree, what chemicals to use, the different methods, the common sort of, mistakes and whatnot. And hopefully that means that after that webinar, you'll be able to roll out the door the next day and go and release your plants for the season, because, it'll be good timing by then. So, okay, we've got a few questions. Spray nozzle or guard? Yes. So if you're most people will be using a solo knapsack sprayer. Solo have actually a few different guards. They've got a fan guard, like one that goes out like a cone. Some of the they've got like a conical shaped one. Just depends on the nozzle and the spray that you're using. Yeah, they work. We really train our team that you're using your sprayer it's like a scalpel and not a flamethrower. It's the best way to describe it is that you just take your time and just know where the edge of your spray is, and you don't have to go right up against that tree. Just sort of give it the space to actually come through and kill the grass around it. Too many people get a bit impatient, overspray plants, and yeah, it's almost as bad as not releasing them if you're going to be spraying them with chemical. Guards are not the be all and end all because you can still get chemical on a plant. Initially, when we actually started with a shield on a standard, and you put that up against the tree and you spray and you go around. But our guys have developed this skill. We take our time and you build into it. We also use electric sprayers when we're out there because you maintain an even sort of fan on your sprayer, and that means you know exactly where the edge of your chemical is going. So yeah, it helps a lot. So okay, can you plant as you site prep? E.g., clear out Trandasidia by hand, put it in a wee bag, and then plant there on the same day. Totally. Yeah, absolutely no reason why you can't. Trandasidia is not actually going to kill your plants outright if it's next to if it's adjacent to it. The key thing is just making sure that you're not sort of wandering away, going to the beach for a couple of months in the summer, and then coming back and going, oh, crap, it's growing everywhere because those things grow pretty aggressively in the summer. Yeah, so if you clear it out of the way so your plant's got a good start, and then you're there to do the maintenance thereafter, then there's absolutely no reason why you can't do that. Will we be providing information on meeting the obligations of the RMA, freshwater farm regulations that are being updated by government? Lots of requirements for spraying and planting to manage risks of fresh water. Yes, this is great, Hayley. Thank you very much for that question. Look, the best thing you can actually do if you're going to be doing spraying on farm is to go and do a grow safe course. So the regulations around spraying, where you're allowed to spray and what you're allowed to spray with, are quite prescribed, but they're pretty easy to get your hands on. Also, ChatGPT. You literally can just be like, cool, I'm spraying with a chemical. Here's a picture of the label. Where am I allowed to spray that under the New Zealand regulations as published in the freshwater farm regulations, and ChatGPT will go and find that for you and tell you exactly what you can and can't do. So yeah, a number of tools. In terms of us out on farm spraying, so we've got 2 registered chemical applicators in our team. So that's sort of the highest level chemical application registration, and all of our team are grow safe trained in terms of good practice with chemicals. So our team know the rules, and we have to do CPD on maintaining that. And so we'll make sure it is. But yeah, I would recommend getting on a grow safe course. But yeah, if in doubt, ChatGPT will access that information direct from the source for you as well. So, Sue, arum lily, yes. Now, I don't know if it was you or someone else sent that through actually this afternoon around arum lilies. So you have to be really careful with chemical around water. And it's the point that Hayley's made above in terms of what you can and can't do. So we found the best thing with arum lilies is actually to cut them and paste them with a gel. So there's actually a product called Cut and Paste. And they've got a few different chemical mixes in there. And they'll be able to tell you specifically which one you can use in those sort of waterside areas. I think it's a metzaferon and glyphosate you would probably use in that situation, or perhaps it's triplica as the active. Anyway, I'm not a registered chemical applicator, so don't quote me on that, but check that. But definitely cutting them and then pasting them is going to give you the quickest result. We had a client who's actually controlling arum lilies for about 2 years on his property, spraying with trick clipper, and it was as per the weed busters recommendation. And they just took forever and ever to die, and they really just weren't actually getting hammered. So yeah, cutting and pasting evidently seems to be far and away the best way to go. So yeah. Tom, what would you say the best ways to plant and speed up growth for dryland planting? Restoration projects near Twizel, painfully slow, yes. I think you're semi-answering the question a little bit there. Understand the limitations for your site. So if water is the big issue for you, it's not just as simple as watering. You can't go out there and just water everything, but it's retaining water. So things like mats, organic covers over top wool mats and things like that will have water seep through, and then you're going to stop that evapotranspiration from around your plants. This is where fertilizer tabs and stuff really play their part. We don't use fertilizer tabs as a general rule, but in areas where you need to kick a bit of growth in the guts and get it going, using fertilizer tabs is actually a really good option. Get things going, and you can still apply a fertilizer tab, just a couple pushed in the soil around the plant, a year later, if they're still sort of not going, and those will eventually wash through. So yeah, every site's different in terms of what the limiting factors are. It might be that the site is too fertile and you're getting this sort of growth rushing through and covering over things, in which case you're like, great, we schedule some more release spray, a more regular check-in. In your situation, if water's the limiting factor, look, covering the ground, reducing water loss, and putting fertility in there to sort of boost things up. So yeah, which is good. Okay, I've just had another question through. What companion planting do we suggest? This is really good chat. This is a really, as a vegetable gardener, I love a bit of companion planting. The big thing is looking at how a native forest grows. So it doesn't take too long to you wander into a forest, a healthy forest that's not sort of overrun with browsers and pests, and go, what do we need to do to mimic this when we're creating our forest? And what it is basically, it's a combination of hardy colonizing plants, and then it's long-lived species that are going to succeed them. So, the best companion is, like, say it's a manuka that grows really fast and it's really hardy, and you're sticking your kakatea under here who wants a bit of shade and shelter next to it, and they're just the best of buddies, because ultimately that manuka is going to rush away, and then the kakatea is going to get the space to come through there, which will be awesome. So cool. More questions. Convolvulus, Katie. Yeah, great chat. Convolvulus, little and often. Don't get to February and go, oh, I might go and check if we've got convolvulus. You need to kind of rip down there before Christmas, around Christmas time, and it'll just be starting to grow. If it's climbing over plants, actually just manually pulling it off and away from the plants, and then spraying it in situ, and then come back 2 weeks later, spray anything else that's growing, come back 2 weeks later, spray anything else that's going, until it's just not coming in. The problem with convolvulus is it gets into streams and it just basically winds its way down drains and streams all summer long. Ultimately, if you don't have plants in already, and I know you do there, but controlling convolvulus, you want to get onto it in the autumn and knock it back with, which one did we use for that? Conquest. So it's a balance of picloram and triclopyr as actives, and that knocks the convolvulus back. It sucks it back into the crown and basically kills it. Whereas when you're treating it in the growing season, you can just be knocking it with glyphosate, and you're really just knocking back what's growing, to keep it keep it in check. But yeah, little and often, and getting onto it early in the summer is really the only solution. Yeah, we've, again, farmers call us up in the middle of February and be like, all my plants are under convolvulus. And it's like, we can sort that out, but man, it's a manual process at that point. If we saw convolvulus as a risk on that farm, we would try and, again, control it the summer and autumn beforehand, and get there early in that season to come and get on top of it. So yeah, it is a real problem. So cool. I think that might be us in terms of questions. So yeah, thanks everyone. I managed to keep it relatively short tonight, not prattling on for too long, but yeah, really appreciate your questions. Look, this is only scratching the surface in terms of ways that you can stuff up planting. But yeah, it's cool for everyone to know what is at risk and what the common mistakes are. And ultimately, we're always here to help. So my email's there. Just flick me an email, and yeah, I'm always happy to help. We can help you with planning for sites, and if you've got a weed issue, just send a photo. If you want to know what plants to plant where, yep, anything. We love trees, here to help. So Awesome. Thank you very much, team. So yeah, we'll be back in 5 weeks' time for the next webinar, which will be on plant releasing. So yeah, thank you very much. Really enjoyed having everyone here, and we'll talk again soon.